This is Changemakers with Katie Gore, finding the right solutions for the affordable housing community.
I'm back with Changemaker Jennifer Keogh, the Vice President of Operations and Affordable Housing at Progress Residential, one of the nation's largest single-family rental providers. We've been discussing the 25 years of experience in the affordable housing industry she's brought to her role. So, Jennifer, could you take out your crystal ball and predict the future and impact at Progress Residential in the next 5 years?
I'm excited of the growth that we've had. I think the partnerships that we're continuing to build with those local housing authorities. We are trying to build also partnerships and relationships with our city officials. We know that many cities have affordable housing plans. They have affordable housing goals. And again, bringing in how can we be a partner in a public-private partnership? How can we help the city meet their affordable housing goals? And so it's creating those partnerships and creating more opportunity, right? Through, I think, a variety of affordable housing options. You know, the acceptance of the voucher is just one. But if there's a housing authority that is a moving to work agency, think about being able to be part of a solution that's really local and where a housing authority could create a program that meets their local needs, and we could be a partner in that in some way. So I don't have this crystal ball of like, I want 9,000 units or 12 or half of. I don't have that. But what gets me up every morning is to know how much potential there is because of the seat that I'm sitting in and the company that I work for. There's a lot of opportunity to make really good change in communities.
That's very encouraging and exciting, isn't it, to actually be in a position at a company that can make that happen.
And is dedicated to it.
Mm-hmm. Let me take a step back and go back before your Progress Residential days, because you've been a change maker in your other role as the Deputy Executive Director when you were in Minneapolis too. And it's so interesting that both of these have some key components to what you're doing. Reflect on your days in Minneapolis and maybe how that built for your current endeavors. Not just, the operational and the experience, and the compliance pieces, but do you want to reflect on any lessons learned from when you were in Minneapolis and what that means in your current endeavors?
My time at Minneapolis, it was during, I get goosebumps when I think about it, Katie, it was during the most pivotal moments in our country's history. Global pandemic and a time of social unrest. Minneapolis was the epicenter with the murder of George Floyd right in my city. And when you are a houser, these types of events don't stop your critical and essential work. You have to continue every day because your job is to provide affordable housing. And in times like that time we were living in, it almost seems surreal, but safety became paramount. Safety was everything. MPHA houses roughly 26,000 residents each and every night, 42 high-rises, and I think they had like 800 to 1,000 single-family rentals peppered in every district in the city. And so they had a huge footprint. And in times like that, it was like operating in crisis mode the entire time. During that, we still closed a demo dispo on our single family rental and did a Section 18 conversion and did project-based vouchers. We did our first RAD high rise and added units to the city. And every day I would say to myself and I would say to our team, we can do hard things. It became our mantra. We had to. We didn't have a choice. We pulled together healing circles for employees because the level of trauma was so high, I testified before Congress during that time. We implemented incident command structures that hadn't been in place that needed to be in place. We developed a long-term investment strategy and looking at ways to design different innovative programs that met what our city needed because we were moving to work agency. We had some local control. And I think my lesson through all of that is, A, we can do hard things. We have to do hard things. But also, you have to pivot. You have to be nimble and strategic at the same time. You can't let one or the other dominate. You have to be nimble and strategic at the same time. And I think all of those experiences of things being thrown at you, catch it, react, and say, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do this is really helped shape me into the leader that I am, and working in a private sector where being nimble is absolutely essential.
You're talking about a management mantra that doesn't always fit within the org structure of a government agency, though. So it's interesting to hear you describe the needs of the community and the needs of what was happening, and then being in the leadership position to make that happen.
Katie, I think back to the community response that was required, not just with the 26,000 residents, but the true responsibility of those 300 employees every day, whether it was safety, because just like many urban cities, we were seeing an uptick in personal violence. And so just making, every night, just praying that my residents were safe and my employees were safe. And then again, like I said, then there's the whole emotional trauma that goes along with that, and making sure that the employees, they felt safe. Psychological safety plays a huge role in productivity of your employees.
So I want to change here because you have been a NARO advocate for so long. You just won the NARO's Advocacy Award, which for people who don't know is something the equivalent to a Grammy. It is big league, big time. And just hearing you describe the things you've done over your career, it is no wonder that you have been awarded this industry Grammy, this NARO Advocacy Award. And obviously, advocacy is a passion of yours. I was in the audience when you got it. I was one of the tons of people trying to take your photo up and get your signature and congratulate you. Reflect on that. I've got you here. I have to ask what it felt like to win the award, but also what it was like on that journey leading into that award with all of your advocacy efforts.
Well, I was shocked and surprised. I think the NARO team definitely, I kept asking, do we have an award winner? I haven't had any applications to judge, and she kept telling me not to worry about it. And well, there was a reason not to worry about it, because they were going to surprise me. And it was an honor. Again, back to why advocacy is important is I think back to that high rise in Albert Lea, Minnesota, that was home to my grandma, and all of these people that really deserved an amazing place to call home, and knowing that so many of the people that we serve in affordable housing or in assisted housing, whatever language you want to use, have been voiceless. I've always thought, whether I held this position of leader, at my organization, but maybe it's my social work roots, but I have always felt that we hold this responsibility to be an advocate. So I don't think it matters if you're a frontline administrative assistant at the Housing Authority or you are the executive director at the Housing Authority. We share the same mission. And our mission is to be the voice of not just the agency, because we need to fight for the funding, right? And different policies, but we're being the voice of our residents that for so many years haven't been provided the opportunity to advocate and to speak for themselves. And so I think we have learned over the years that we can't rely on hope. We saw in my career, we've seen some of the darkest and deepest cuts come through public housing and through the voucher program. Cuts that resulted in, if you remember, sequestration, the result of 70,000 vouchers lost nationally. And Katie, I don't think our voices were loud enough back then. I just don't think they were. We weren't yelling from the rooftops. We weren't explaining to Congress why we needed administrative fees to be able to keep our doors open. I remember sitting at a round table at our state chapter association meeting, and there was a housing authority that told me to cut costs. They had shut down the trash service to their central office, and she was taking the trash home. That's what our administrative fees are for, right? They're for so many things. And so I just think that we have to have a strategy when it comes to Congress, because if we don't tell the story, right, and storytelling is so incredibly important, there will be another narrative and there will be another story that's told on our behalf that they will listen to, right? And so getting ahead of it, I think we've done such a good job in the last 6 years. And I say that only because I was the ledge chair, just kidding. But I think we've done this really concerted effort through NARO is to build that advocacy base. And we grew our advocacy base by over 300%. And at one point, sending over 50,000 letters to Congress. And Katie, it's no surprise that when you do that, you yield results. Guess what happened? We saw restoration to public housing dollars. We saw restoration to the Housing Choice Voucher administrative dollars. We saw where it was going to be across-the-board cuts to home and CDBG not happen and actually get increases in dollars. That's because of dedicated, consistent storytelling. So advocacy, there's no room for being complacent in this work. And you have to carve out the time to be an advocate, because if you don't, you will see those results, and they won't be the results that will help you leverage the programs that our community needs.
You also received the Distinguished Service Regional NARO Award, the Charles A. Thompson Award. What did that mean for you, and what was surrounding that award?
So again, a bit of a surprise. And when I accepted the award, I joked that if you win an award with someone's name on it, I thought that, because I remember sitting in the audience 20 years ago thinking, gosh, these people probably have been doing this work for a really long time. And as I'm receiving this award that says Charles A. Thompson on it, I thought, that's me now. I've been doing this work for a really long time. Oh my gosh, that's me. But I thought about the people. We have a very, NARO, whether it's at the state, the region, or the national level, very close community, right? We always say we're NARO family. And I remember sitting in the audience when so many amazing leaders received that award before me. And people that took me in and were a source of inspiration, mentor, took me under their wing. Jim Ingalls from Michigan, who retired several years ago, I remember when he received that award. And I remember when Sheila Miller from Nebraska received that award. There were so many people that I'm standing on their shoulders. And so I stood up there just honored to think, wow, somebody thought so highly of work that I do, because it means a lot, right? It's part of my DNA, and I'm passionate about it, and it's critical. And we don't do it for accolades. We do it because we love it. And so it was I think, just an honor to stand on the shoulders and receive it in front of my NARO family.
Speaking of NARO, one more thing I want to mention. You have been involved with us for the Women of Empowerment at NARO. We've done 2 so far, and reflect what that has meant to you and what you've seen come of that.
So I remember having a conversation with our past president, Sunny Shaw, and we were talking about, why don't more women jump into the role of executive director and CEO of housing authorities? And then we were looking at where are the job opportunities for either of us, right? And thinking about some of our sister colleagues and looking at what would be opportunities. Most of those opportunities, Katie, would require you to pack your home and your family and relocate. And guess what? Men have done that their entire careers. They've packed up their families and they've done that. But as women, that hasn't been a consideration. And only recently, our colleague, Ivory Matthews, packed herself up from South Carolina and relocated to Home Forward, and now she's reunited with her family. But she lived bi-coastal for a period of time. But thinking about, we need to create space for women to talk about these realities, particularly as more women want to be executive directors. They want to be CEOs of housing authorities or high-level leaders in housing authorities. And how do we foster that empowerment? And also just talking about the fact that it is very different to be a woman in leadership than it is for a man, and to have this place that's safe and empowering. And what we said, we were sparking this sisterhood. And when I looked around and I was listening to the table conversations, so many stories were similar, right? Where we talked about feeling guilty because we had to leave to go to a kid's activity or conferences at school or a doctor's appointment. And there were so many women, Katie, that talked about keeping the light on in their office instead of turning it off, saying, gotta go, I've got to go watch Connor at baseball practice. It was, I'm going to leave my light on. I'm hoping that nobody sees me, that I've left a half an hour early, and knowing that I don't think our male counterparts experienced that same thing. And so that's why this Women of NARO is so important, is we need a place and to be able to encourage each other and talk about shared experiences.
Well, I have you here talking about shared experiences and shared wisdom. I want to just ask you, what advice would you give somebody who is in affordable housing right now? They're listening to you and your experiences and your awards, and they're trying to measure up, or they're trying to plot their career path, knowing that the daily is a challenge. Is there advice that you would give them that maybe you wish you had heard?
Oh, there's a few things. One of the best things I did for myself was put myself in experiences or conversations or conferences, trainings that may not have applied to what I was doing that day. I started to think about, and I call it looking beyond your desk. Don't think about the files that you have to process, or that every training that I'm going to go to, whether it's at a NARO conference or another conference, doesn't have to always be practitioner related to the work I'm doing today. Seeing beyond your desk means stepping into the executive director's roundtable or going to a session that's geared towards housing choice voucher directors when you're a housing coordinator. Learning the language, starting to understand leadership. And so when I've had the opportunity to mentor to mentor people, that's my biggest piece of advice, is take every opportunity you can to learn and grow. And when you're presented opportunities like attending a conference, is don't always go to the thing that's going to benefit you today. Think about your tomorrow. And I firmly believe, Katie, that helped the trajectory of my career path, because when I started listening in and I understood, I was like, I get the math of housing choice voucher utilization. I remember sitting in my first HCV utilization conversation with Jonathan Zimmerman, who was at NARO at the time, and grabbing him after class going, my head is spinning. Do you have 5 minutes? Like, I need to download this with you. I was frontline staff, Katie, but recalling as I wanted more opportunities to grow at the housing authority, I spent 14 years at my first housing authority, started as frontline staff, left as director. And I firmly believe it's because I was able to go, oh, I remember they talked about this, and I could go to my director or my supervisor and say, here's a strategy that I heard them talking about that will help us not go into shortfall. And so that's a huge piece of advice. The other thing is resiliency. I think at any level of where you're at within your journey is you have to learn resiliency. And again, I think that many of us really had to dig into that, particularly during the pandemic. But knowing that you are a part of something bigger, particularly when you're in affordable housing and you're a servant leader, you get that end of the day is what drives, what drives you is you have to know that your purpose is bigger than you.
And that resiliency piece is really hard because there's not a lot of checklists and manuals and roadmaps. And quite honestly, they're lessons learned the hard way. And that is not a comfortable space that many people like to be in, personally or professionally. So that's a really, really difficult one for people in their journeys to say it's okay to learn lessons the hard way. It's okay to build up professional muscle, and with each experience, realize what worked and didn't work, and then have a continual feedback loop, isn't it? I mean, that right there is just unique to have somebody who's going to embrace that instead of staying safe and shying away from that.
Yeah. The word I would use is you have to be able to lean in. And ever more paramount, obviously, as a leader. But I watched my team, no matter what job they had that they held within the organization, be dang resilient over really, really hard time in our country's history.
We have been talking with Jennifer Keogh, the Vice President of Operations and Affordable Housing at Progress Residential. Jennifer, you have been a wealth of information and wisdom. I thank you for your time and joining us on the Changemaker podcast.
Thank you, Katie.
Thanks for listening to Changemakers with Katie Gore. To find out more about Katie, go to quadel.com. That's QUADEL.com. This has been a production of Forbes Books Radio.